Thank you. We'll go to Mike 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really great to be here with all of you, and I'd like to thank Squamish for allowing me into their beautiful territory. It's been a while since I've been around this table, and I appreciate the time and accommodation. I have to teach at the law school tonight, so they're fitting me in. So thank you, Sophie, for letting me get in front of you. As you know, I co-chair the Heritage Conservation Working Group, and we've been working on an action plan for the area as the chiefs have adopted in many other areas: fish, children and families, justice. We did a lot of action plans in our day, and we needed some direction to the working group that works directly with the province on trying to make progress in the area of heritage conservation. So in February, we were able to have a conference, and our technical staff had pulled together a discussion paper that was circulated before the conference. We had a lot of discussions, and we ranked a lot of the recommendations and took those, and we produced another paper, sent it out to the communities, got more input, and a third paper went out this summer. And what you have in front of you is the fourth draft of the action plan. So we've had input from a lot of chiefs, technical people, and community members on this action plan. So I'll really quickly walk you through the action plan, just so that you know the setup. So the executive summary is there. The context, giving you all the background of the legislation, and where we get into more of the details is on page 9. And that's the way forward. How do we deal with some of the issues that are vital and critical in our communities dealing with heritage conservation? And so we've set out vision and goals that we established through the community consultations and the papers that we were doing, and set that up as the areas that we're going to work in. You'll notice some of these goals will be enacted by leadership. Some of it will be community. But we wanted to be very clear that this working group is subject to the terms of reference of the Leadership Council and the working groups. This group does not do anything on behalf of communities, specific community issues, and that is up to each First Nation to look after their own issues, and we're really just at a higher level trying to change policies, help promote mechanisms and tools that First Nations can use. And so the goals are set out, and then there's a whole list of recommendations of actions that we can do. And of course, one of the main ones is building relationships, relationships with government, relationship with education in the school systems, real estate agents. We need to do a lot of education about how our heritage artifacts are dealt with in the sales and purchase of land. Legislation and policy. We all know that the Heritage Conservation Act is not a good one, and that in the long term we need to change that. And if it's a First Nations doing their own laws, that's a good thing. In the interim, we have to try and find ways to look at the long-term amendment of that act. We have been working very diligently at the working group to change some of the policies. We've had input on some of the policies, and the province has actually changed those. So if you go to their website, you can see some of those policies have been changed. Conservation and enforcement, of course, are areas that we see the government and the RCMP not really pushing. So we have people that are violating the Heritage Conservation Act and nothing happens. And so that's an area that we need to work on. Working with local governments and their land use planning, their official community plans. There's some actions there. Working with archaeological overview assessments, site alteration permits, using First Nations in the field. As you're aware, the Heritage Act allows for altering sites, and they just have to issue a permit. And so some of the tougher subjects that we're dealing with right now are things like, how does the province weigh up collective alteration permits? So let's take, for example, Site C, or some mine that there's a large number of heritage sites within that area. How does the government weigh those? In the Site C example, there's 334 recorded archaeological sites that will be destroyed if they go ahead. And how does the province look at weighing the social benefit versus the First Nations values? And so those are some of the tough topics that we're trying to tackle there. Or even, how does the government look at First Nations values? If you have a site in your territory and you don't want it touched, and how do they weigh how much you appreciate that site versus, you know, what they think that site is worth, and the development going ahead? So we're trying to have some of those tough discussions and trying to find ways around them, ways of acknowledging our need to use the archaeologists we want, using our First Nations in the field, just having those discussions. In the longer term, there's some greater projects that we need to deal with, and that's the education, knowledge gaps, the pilot project, looking at legislation that will work, mechanisms, encouraging the government. We see a lot of best practices, you know, one-offs that the government has entered into with First Nations, and can we encourage more of those kind of mechanisms for other First Nations to take advantage of? And so we've tried very hard to find all the issues and areas that First Nations would like us to look at and work on. And of course, communications with these tables, with the chiefs tables, with the Leadership Council, will continue in the work. We collected a lot of emails from the forum that we can send information out to on progress or when we need input on various issues that we have. But after a lot of hard work by our technical people, we have this draft action plan that we're looking for support for, and it will guide the work of the joint working group, which normally meets once a month with the province, so we can try and deal with some of these issues in the interim while you're working on the longer term solutions at treaty or other agreements that you've been negotiating.
Thank you. Just for your information, what was handed out was a two-page briefing note. The actual plan is with the resolution to be for your presentation. It's in the package. We have a resolution for your consideration on Resolution Day to support the First Nation Heritage Conservation Action Plan without infringement on nations.